Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Robert Hutter, founder and CEO of FireStart, who will be talking to you today about business process automation with FireStart, SharePoint and Office 365. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC19. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center where you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Robert Hutter. Hello, Robert.
Hello, hi there. Nice to meet you. Great joining the session today.
Okay, take it away, Robert.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining today's webinar. My name is Robert Hutter. I'm founder and CEO of FireStart. We are a Microsoft ISV partner in the regard of business process management and workflow automation. And yeah, we're also very happy that we were this year's European SharePoint conference lead sponsor. And in that regard, my topic for today would be to really give you a little bit about overview about how business process automation can really enhance your collaboration experience and also work together with your content strategy, communication strategy that you're about to build with SharePoint, Office 365, Power Apps, Flow, and other tools in this regard. So I would really like to start with a brief overview about FireStart, give a little bit about background on it, talk a little bit about the history of different facts and flavors, how you can design business processes, how you automate business processes, and then also bring you more into about our approach, how we tackle the topic, and how we can make that fit with SharePoint and Office 365 content and collaboration strategy. Yeah, some facts and figures about our company. So we are an headquarters based in Austria. I founded the company 2006. So about 13 years ago, together with a colleague. And ever since, we've been working to build a BPM platform from scratch to really fit into the whole Microsoft experience, service experience that you already know with SharePoint and other tools in that regard. We've also been awarded Microsoft Partner of the Year in 2016, which we were very happy. And we really worked our way into becoming step by step a global leader in the BPM space itself. We have some very different customer situations that we deal with. Also to say that we don't only tackle large size customers with BPM, but we see the topic also growing more to small and mid-sized businesses because there's a big need for automation. There's a big need for digital business processes, really building that in a strategic way and not in a project-driven way. And this is also like with the variety of customer situations we have. It's always, again, about building collaboration. It's about integrating your business critical processes into the collaboration strategy the best you can. We also work with a huge variety of collaboration partners in Europe, in North America, which are our primary target markets where we have local subsidiaries to address the market. Also know that we bring in our competence and our platform as a vendor, and we really want to leverage that with partners that work in the Microsoft space and the collaboration space. So basically to start, what is BPM? Why should I care about BPM, business process management? And one of the facts that I've experienced over the last, let's say, decade is that the whole approach, how you build applications, how you build a collaboration IT strategy pretty much shifts in the basic paradigm that lies beyond it. So in the past, it was always like very system-driven, how you engineered structures, governance, processes. So there was mainly one system in the middle that really give the guidance to the people, how they should align to the content, to the functionality of the system. with more and more services popping up, and you see that happening in Office 365, there are a lot of microservices out there. The question is not about how do we fit them to one system, but really how to align them into a business process so that the actual users make sense out of it and can use that in their daily business, in their collaboration. And this is really shifting like from a process follows IT approach to IT follows process approach, because all we do in the end is about to improve business, and business heavily relies on business processes because this is the heart of what you do. This is the heart of the products you build, the services that you deliver to your customers and suppliers. So caring about business processes and make them more efficient, user-centric is kind of key if you want to succeed in your collaboration strategy. And with that shift, it's very hard to follow if you don't really shift into the basic paradigm, also seeing the value of a BPM platform in place. Because if you don't have that, it's always like applications moving apart, and then the user becomes like the interface between the systems. And people do not really schedule that well. They do not scale. And then when it comes back to fallback emails, Excel sheets, you know that from your daily business, then it's really hard to govern the whole end-to-end business process around the line of business applications. And that's basically a process problem, because go to your company and ask about a specific process. Everybody has a view on it. Nobody really makes decisions on it. Nobody wants to be responsible for it. So really having a process in place that is clear for everybody is kind of key if you want to succeed. It's also more a data governance problem, because the lack of data quality also results in bad decisions that you make it in your process, and also results in bad KPIs and in bad performance that you get out of your systems. Because if you just struggle around what's the right data record that I'm relying on, this has nothing to do with business value. This is just maintenance. And what you see also with SharePoint involving more and more features coming in, Teams, Power Apps, Flow, it's all about communication. How do you communicate to a one-to-one level, to a one-to-many level, to a Teams level? That there are so many ways how you can communicate, and this should also be a fundamental part of our overall process strategy. Where do I communicate and how do I communicate content to the right people? And there's always been like this big struggle between business people and IT people. And you probably know that from your own experience. It's always like business people try to articulate their requirements in a proper way. IT people care more about services, architecture, programming languages. So there's always like, how do you communicate between business requirements and IT fulfillment in the end? And one approach from the business side is always like you get stuck in process modeling. You get stuck in Visio files that isolated explain a process, a requirement, but really is never feasible in terms of reality check. So to implement the process, it would have a lot of constraints that you cannot break. And then very often it just gets stuck in a pilot project, a concept phase where you don't really get into implementation of it. And the other way is like you always want to make your process requirements fit into one application. So they're always like downsizing your requirements to the boundaries of an application, which should not be the case, because like a process by nature very often is something cross unit, cross business, and very often doesn't just happen in one application. And this is like for the sake of control, for the sake of governance, you very often sacrifice speed, efficiency, and end-to-end governance on the business. IT side is always like if you get stuck in too low-level engineering and always try to reinvent the wheel every time anew, you don't really add business value. It's just about it gets more and more complex. You need really specific resources to tackle the complexity, and this will lead you nowhere along the business value chain. And the other extreme point is like you just start building automation, start building workflows without caring about the actual business process design. And this also gets very often stuck at the end of the game. You find out, oh, we should have thought more about this specific process and the requirements before we start implementing it. And between all these extreme points, our approach was really to make a fit about how we combine standardization, good-looking process design, technical extensibility, and automation into one platform that doesn't make you end up in one of the extreme points, but really build a bridge between business and IT to implement business processes very fast and with a low-code approach. And there, in regard to when it comes to how do you design your business processes, it has always been about fact and flavor and notations, and there's quite a variety around. So maybe from our experience, to give you a little history about how these notations have evolved over the last couple of years. In the beginning, there was simply the flowchart. So flowchart is pretty much a start point, an end point, actions, and gateways in between where you make decisions. There was no real specification about classification. There were no really stages that you could build on. So it was a good starting point to really get a rough idea about a business process requirement, but it was never really ending up into be that specific that you could actually build on it with more complex business processes. That mainly came from the from the business approach. The IT approach was more like getting mainly into stage machine workflows. So you actually would want to manage the stage of a specific application that you're building. So it was more like just managing the stages, but very complex in the visualization, how the transition between the stages works. And it brought in a lot of constraints about parallel flows, about recursive flows. So once you started building more complex business process workflow logic, you pretty much got stuck into this notation very, very quickly. And in the early days, a lot about SharePoint Designer, Visual Studio worked that way, how you build workflows around SharePoint. On the business side, there were event-driven process chains, which you maybe know from ours and tools like that. So they became famous by really incorporating stages into the business process design. So it was always like activity and later have a stage that you can build on, but in a more broader sense about parallelization, about reusability on business processes, and also brought in more classification elements in that regard. The next try on the IT side to harmonize automation language was a business process execution language, which tried to become a standard across multiple vendors like IBM, Oracle followed that standard, but it was never really adopted in a bigger sense on the cross market. It was very technical. So really, again, there was a misalliance with the business requirements due to the technical complexity and was more like a try and error approach for this. But something has evolved over the recent years, and which is business process model and notation now in 2.0 version. And this is actually the notation that also we try to follow when implementing business processes, because it's a worldwide standard. And we see a lot of companies adopting that standard really to communicate between business and IT. And it also brings in a classification about not just having tasks, but see, okay, is this a human task? Is this a scripting task? And really defining the language that you can, at the end up on the business process model. And I could hand it over to another company, and somebody who uses the same notation completely understands what I mean by building it on top of that notation. So from our experience, I would highly recommend really going for a standard because like it's a lot of effort that you put in building these business processes. And if you can avoid getting into a vendor lock-in if you follow a standard that a lot of vendors adopt. And this is something that is crucial if you want to reuse your assets over multiple years and not just rebuild everything once you make a vendor change or things like that. And this is basically the approach that we follow and the life cycle that we've implemented in FireStart to have the whole business process modeling topic professionalized, following these different notations, following the BPMN 2.0 standard, and then on top of that, going into the automation. So really make the end-to-end business process work also in very business critical scenarios, very high load scenarios, and manage all the governance, the staging, the workflow control in the backbone. And then out of it, you can really derive business process intelligence, because you would be really surprised how much things you find once you make your automation transparent, once you analyze your execution times, your process costs in a transparent way, you find a lot of blocking points that have been invisible before, but really that you can tackle later in a structured and managed approach. And the end-to-end goal is really like make the strategy fit with your collaboration and content management strategy. Because what you build with SharePoint, with Office 365 is mainly about content, governance, content, OneDrive, SharePoint lists, doc libraries. It's all about how you manage content, how you make content accessible to people. But the layer that we build on top of it is about how does the end-to-end business process work? Not just within your content strategy, but how does it work with your ERP system? How does it work with your CRM system? And really try to figure out the end-to-end business process and fill the gaps with decent workflows in between, so that we can take care of the handover between the applications to the content and make the end-to-end business process work as seamless as possible. And this is kind of the strategy that we bring in with FireStart to your collaboration environment. And when you start business process modeling, it's about also bringing in governance, because like business processes are not just side by side living like you would do in video files, but they all have relationships. They have relationships within each other. They have relationships to your application strategy, to your IT strategy, to your data structures. So there are a lot of dependencies that you need to be aware of and also maintain. Because if I go in here and say, okay, we drop out a certain service in Office 365, there might be dozens of processes relying on the service. And then the question is, how do you re-engineer the business process to the next version so that you use the next version of the service and don't break the business process? And in that regard, you mainly have two people, like the one building business process and workflows. The other is like consuming on a participant level, all of that information is available. And you can later incorporate that into your SharePoint environment. You can later also incorporate that in our own dedicated business process portal and adapt it to your corporate identity. So there's a lot of freedom how you want to roll it out to your users. And with our dedication to Microsoft, that we have a very close relationship, both on a business development, on a technical level, we really tried to follow all the paradigm that you've known for many, many years in Office 365, in your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, so that it's really like from the usability, look and feel, very similar to what you've experienced with other toolset in that regard. So really very visual approach in building the processes, and later on also very low-code model-driven approach to go into automation, whether it's designing forms, making connectivity to the backbone systems, etc., etc. When it comes to automation, there's a lot more that an engine needs to take care of. So we've built an enhanced workflow engine on our own that is really also capable, on the one hand, executing BPMN 2.0 notation files, but on the other hand, also enhancing the whole staging governance on runtime automation. So whether it's escalation management, it's task scheduling, forms generation. So there are a lot of enhanced capabilities that we've built in our workflow engine. And basically the workflow engine later on manages the system interaction to the user touch points. And the user touch points are mainly like the tasks that we schedule to users and say, hey, Robert, there's a new task available. This is the relevant data context for you in this task, and make it as convenient as possible to perform the task, manipulate data in a process-driven way. And therefore, we have also quite a variety of plugins that we've developed. So whether you want to publish it in our own dedicated business process portal, or if you want to incorporate into your Outlook, for example. So you also see like what's happening now with Knowledge Center, things like that. A lot of that stuff, again, should be integrated into the daily business inbox. And this is your Outlook email inbox at the end of the game. And this is the same way that we can really make the form factor available within Outlook without moving out of the system to another system to take action, manipulate content in that regard. Also, a very crucial point in the whole automation topic is about data structures. How do you build interfaces to your line of business applications? And what you don't want to do is that you end up in building an interface for every workflow anew. Because then if you have one, let's say, very crucial interface and that changes, then you would need to touch point 10 different workflow scenarios and adopt them. And by centralizing that on a data structure that is reusable over multiple workflows and making the connection bindings there, it's a lot easier to have a change management process in place than just adopting every workflow, every single change you have in your service. And at the end, it's about technical monitoring. So really take care about the governance of the workflows that are getting executed. If there are services not available, tasks that might get locked somewhere at the user inbox. So it's about getting the transparency on the operations, but later also use that metrics for generating high-level KPIs, again, for the management users. Because the person who is responsible for the business process or for the workflow really wants to get this high-level view about, is it performing good, not so good, where do we have improvements? So it's about KPIs, it's about analytics that you want to get out of the operations. And of course, you can use our portal in that regard. You can also integrate that data feed into your Power BI dashboards. So there's also a great variety how you can use that analytics to improve your business processes. And yeah, just some of samples how you can do cost analysis, how you can build operational dashboards that really gives you insights about your operational performance on the workflows that you schedule. And as a summary, before we jump into the demo drive, again, FireStart is kind of really becoming if you implement it in a broader sense, becoming the nervous system, the digestive system of your company. So we really try to combine your collaboration strategy that you're building with SharePoint, with Office 365, to your crucial line of business applications, like your SAP backbones, your Salesforce, your Dynamics product lines. So whenever, if I look on our customer base, even the smallest customers, they have at least a dozen of different line of business applications that they want to integrate into their collaboration strategy. And building a dedicated BPM layer with FireStart in between can really solve a lot about of this transition business process topics that you will have in your daily operations. And then you are really free to define your processes in an independent layer. So you're not bound to one application, how they run their internal workflows, but you can really adopt business processes very flexible, very easy in this layer, which gives you a lot of possibilities about connecting on-premise systems with cloud services in hybrid scenarios. And this is also what we see right now on our customer base, that they have a lot of mainly on-premise stack, but they want to go for Office 365. And the question is always about how we can make a smooth transition between these two worlds in terms of our business processes. And FireStart can really also be very helpful in this regard. And one thing also that we see very often mixed up is that you should separate the requirements about automation from a company perspective and automation from a user and individual perspective. Because both want to automate, but like enterprise business workflow automation that we do on this level is something completely different than personal automation that you would want to do with Power Apps and flows and robotic process automation. So these two go hand in hand ideally, but there's like, from a company perspective, you want to build long-running, highly, also very complex, very often business processes that you can bring into the product governance about change management, about connectivity. On the other hand, a user really wants to automate for his personal effort, for his personal view on things. So mainly on if this then that, update my calendar, if there's a new file in Dropbox, whatever, or OneDrive. So really building small flows that help me as a person, but make that fit into a broader business process automation strategy that you would build with FireStart. So with that as an intro, I really want to now jump into a small demo and show you how this is, give you a glimpse about how this is implemented step by step or into your organization. So the key question is always like where to start. And usually my recommendation would really be start on the very high level business processes, outline what is it that you want to build. And this step is very often overtaken and just going into automation, but really like figure out what is the processes that we are talking about, who's responsible for the marketing customer satisfaction process, where does it start, where does it end, and what should happen in between. Just some very basic core questions, but if you don't ask these questions in the beginning, you don't really build an architecture. It's about, you would start building a house before you have a plan of the house and doing calculation on the house. So making a process landscape is really like making the overall plan, the bigger picture about what are the processes that you're talking about. And then you can go and drill down into more detailed levels. Yeah, like in Bing Maps, you would say, okay, we're now in Europe, and now we're in Austria, and now we're in Linz, and now we're in the kitchen of Robert Hutter. Yeah? So really zoom down to more detailed level, but build the overall governance about how these top processes are linked to each other. And yeah, okay, sorry. And then you should start building the business process. So on a very detailed level, it's about really setting the starting point, setting the activities, building the rules and gateways. And with that building, we're now, as you can see here in the BPMN view, where we can really have like swim lanes in place. Swim lanes really help you in the visual design about what are the key stakeholders in the process. So we have now a key account manager, a sales manager, a head of development. So there are different stakeholders, and building the activities in these swim lanes really helps you to visualize how this process is jumping between different departments, systems, etc. And then it's about classification, because if you can say, okay, we have a starting point. Yeah, so what? That can be anything. And now this is where BPMN 2.0 can really help you to more deep dive define what is it exactly. Is it a time-driven event? Is it a notification from another system? Is it a conditional event? So there's really like the standard that helps you to say, yeah, this is a starting point on a time-driven event. So by just knowing that, I know, okay, this is a periodic event that comes in and kicks off this workflow, and makes a total different meaning than just having an empty event that can be anything at this point. The same with tasks. Yeah, if you have a task, you need to say, is this a scripting task or service task? Is this a manual task for humans? So again, building it, and the classification is really like applying the language to define what is it at the end that you want to build. And then you go and build and outline the business process. We also support different views. So if you want to really come more from a Visio style, you can always also switch to a flowchart view where you build your business processes. And then it's about making relationships and say, okay, in this task, we need to update SharePoint data, and we have a responsibility with the sales manager. So by just dragging and dropping these elements, you build relationships between the business process activities and the surrounding artifacts of the business process. So like here, we have the key account manager, and this is something that comes from a central role model that you reuse over multiple workflows, because it defines, okay, these are the roles and responsibilities we have as a foundation for the business process to work with it. And then it gives you a lot of possibilities about knowing where all of these roles are interlinked. So if I want to find out, okay, show me all the business processes and workflows where our head of development is involved, then I can really use FireStart to know exactly, okay, in this process, in this step, in this version, we have a dependency to this role. And if we decide to change our organization and don't have a head of development anymore, that's a change process that you need to kick off. And then the business processes need to be realigned to a new organizational structure that you give in the next version to the business process designers. But in the end, it's about really building visual rules, gateways, artifacts, step by step, doing the classification. And at the end of the game, you have a solid designed business process that you can publish to the users. And then with the publication, you can go and embed FireStart directly into your SharePoint portals. And instead of moving PDF files around, you really have a dynamic interactive view on the latest version of the business processes. You have rights management so that we control which processes are visible to a certain user group or not, and also give you features like feedback, comments, so that if you want to gather feedback from the users, they can do it directly on top of FireStart and get that back into our system. And then the business owner knows, okay, we have maybe some feedback here and there. Oh, there were 2 people commenting in SharePoint about this activity. And then I really can go in there and communicate with them in a very decent and easy way. But that's like the first part of the whole game. So we really want to build the business process. You want to define all the structures, the capabilities, the tasks that should be fulfilled. And then you would want to go into automation. And then you would go in and build the technical automation on top of the business process design. And the first thing that you need is about connecting your data to your services. And doing that, we have a business entity model, which is kind of defining the data structures that you want to work on in your workflows. And then you define, okay, what is a customer complaint that we store in SharePoint? Or what is a customer record that we get out of our CRM system? Or what is our spare part that we have from our SQL database? So it's really about designing the data structures that work with the business processes on a design level. So this is something that you usually also do on the business process design. Because if you build a rule, if you build a form, you need to know which data you're working on. And this is exactly the data model that you're building on the go. And then later you can go and say, okay, I want to now connect this data model to my SharePoint list where we store customer complaints and service tickets. And doing so, you can use our mapping wizard that really helps you connect to the backbone systems, to the SharePoint environment, but also to your CRM, ERP applications. And this is nothing that you need to code, but really you build it on a drag and drop design. Yeah. So you want to make your connections, you can do the read and write operations in a very easy way. And in that regard, you build out the data structures that our workflow engine can later on read the data in a proper way, but also push back data that you manipulate on the forms and on the end user level. And then you can use the data model to really go and say, okay, we have two starting points, for example, for this. So we have one starting point where we have built a Power App that somebody can add a new customer complaint with a Power App, or we have a complaints list in SharePoint that we connect and want to trigger once as soon as somebody enters a new SharePoint entry in this list. And for this event configuration, you simply have a event handler with the different types of events. So we have data-driven events, we have time-driven events, we have external events, and each of these events can be later configured. In that case, we want to start this workflow as soon as somebody enters a new service request into the SharePoint list. We can also apply certain rules in it. So business process management is all about applying rules at the right point of the business processes. And also say, okay, we want to have additional rules only if that comes from SharePoint, and only if it comes from a specific region, and only if the amount or the severity is very high and critical. So you can build really rules on top of the conditions to kick off the events. Or you could have time-based events. Yeah, like say I want to start a workflow every day to do a compliance check on data structures, things like that. Or I want to hook it up with our Exchange server and start a workflow right when we get an email in the Exchange server on our career address, things like that. So there are a lot of multiple touch points how you can initially start a workflow. And one touch point is also, okay, we just take a handover from a Power App. So we've built a little Power App here, so you can make it more convenient for users to enter new customer complaints. And then you can have a Power App on your mobile device or on your web interface that simply helps you to kick off and start a workflow. And again, you can use the full capabilities of Power Apps functionality to enter the data, but then at the end you hand over to the business process in FireStart that helps you execute the end-to-end business process. And then we have automated activities. So this is, again, you encapsulate things that you want to automate, update data in the backbone system, get data from Active Directory, or send an email, make an SAP transaction. So there are a lot of capabilities, and every editor has a specific wizard that helps you also to configure the servers. So you don't want to code, but say, okay, we want to have from Robert Hutter the specific property from our Active Directory, and then we can say, okay, I want to really get the home drive URL from Robert Hutter, and then get into the update the servers in that regard. Like here, we change the status. We check in our backbone CRM system if this is an existing customer or new customer. Then we would do an update into the CRM system about a new customer complaint. And then we would send out a human task who need to decide, okay, how should we proceed with this task? And if we want to say, okay, we want to have a spare part order, we have another rule after a certain limit that the head of the department need to have an extra approval on it. And then we would hand it over to SAP, which is in that demo scenario, our backbone is a ERP system. We want to generate an output PDF with Docs42. We would hand it over to Microsoft Flow or Power Automate to store, archive the file in a OneDrive. We would want to inform our sales team in the team channel about this update. And then we would want to send out a personalized email to the customer who is affected by this complaint. And again, here, very visually, how you can figure about the email that should get out. And then you can really use your data structures as a wildcard and say, okay, I want to now get my CRM first name in here or my transaction number from SAP in here, and use all of the variables and data structures in getting your services up and running. And as you can see, most of it is done by not coding a single line of code. I mean, you can go maybe down to a coding level if needed. So let's say at that point where we need to have a PowerShell script in place to generate this PDF, we can go down to this level if you need to. So this would be really like the bottom line level if you want to script in PowerShell. That again, you can do that in FireStart, but it's all encapsulated into the overall business process governance and management. And the key question is, how do we integrate now end user into the whole business process? And this is mainly the tasks, because the task is not just a simple task, please Robert do this and that, but the task is really like building a task-driven form that gets all the relevant backbone data in the task and make it available for the user. So here we say, okay, we want to get the CRM contact details from the dynamic CRM right in place when he's performing the task. Or we want to get him the problem description from the SharePoint ticket that we've created. Or he should have access to the ERP spare part catalog, because we need to maybe do a direct approval to order a spare part in that step of the business process. Again, you just drag and drop your interface here, you build what's relevant for this task, and it's regardless about how this looks in SharePoint, SAP, Salesforce, wherever, you just care about making this as efficient for the end user who needs to perform this task. And then when you're finished, you basically can validate and install your business process, and then we would run your business process. And maybe I would just take the Power App as a starting point and say, okay, we have a Robert Hutter, and we're a rocket provider, and we need to replace the rocket nose. And then I would just submit this new request with my Power App, and FireStart would take over this request with the entry point that you've just seen here on the workflow level. So if I now switch to workflows, I can now see all of the running workflow instances in my company. So as a head of the Rocket servers, I want to know what's going on. And the best way is like, if I check my emails, this is the same like here, I check my workflows, what's going on. I see, oh, we have a new Rocket service request here from Robert Hutter. It started at 11:38, and then I now can really follow up about what is going on. So we created a SharePoint list item, we changed the status, we checked if this is an existing customer or new customer in our dynamic CRM application, and then we scheduled a task to one of our skilled workers. And again, it's not about saying this task goes to Robert or to Sebastian or anybody, but this is like, again, building on top of the organizational model that you've seen on the business process design. But now we have actual users that can now be in charge of taking over these forms and tasks according to the business process. And this is now directly linked to your Active Directory, whether it's Azure Active Directory, on-premise Active Directory, but these are really like the people and the user and the groups that you already have, and we assign them to logical process roles that to later send out the tasks and make the tasks available for them. And one very cool interface is Outlook. Yeah, so like people are convenient. Outlook is a daily productivity tool heavily used by many people. And there again, we can now, for example, send out a task to people in Outlook. They would get it into their inbox, but with our FireStart plugin involved, they can now have all the real-time data out of the backbone system and can make cross-system, cross-organizational unit decisions, data manipulations that the workflow has taken care of. So here in that regard, we say, okay, this is the contact details from the CRM application, but I should not be able to change it at that point. But here, for example, I should be able to select an article from our ERP system about which spare part we should order. So, okay, we have the nose cone 4711, and I want to have one spare part ordered till the 24th. It should be a Christmas present for the customer. And then I can make a decision. And again, business process management is also about making decisions. With that information, I did my job, I made a decision, and according to the decision, the workflow can now go on and perform the next tasks in the business. And it's not about everybody that can do anything at any time. This is not a business process, but really like that decision can have a huge impact about what's following into the business process. Yeah? Because I could have ordered 100 no spare parts, and that might be killing our stock in the next step. And this is where we build in rules to avoid this by just saying, okay, we have an extra approval here that after a certain volume, we need to have an extra approval. And here, for example, we now do a handover to our and create a direct purchase order into SAP. And now we update the purchase order number into the dynamic CRM system. And now we generate an output PDF, fully automated with Docs42. And after that, we hand it over to Power Automate and store it in our OneDrive for archiving. And then we update the information in our Teams channel. And at the end of the whole business process, we will send out an automated email to the end user. And here you can really see what's happening. Yeah? And if you want to find out, okay, how did the handover go from FireStart to Flow, you can really see that here, even to a most detailed level if needed. So what were the transaction parameters? What was the service call? Which was the data model involved? So it gives a very detailed, auditable way, transparent way what happened in operations on the server side, on the end user side. Yeah? So at the end of the business process, if I now go to my inbox again, and maybe maybe we can see the email later that's happening. But again, it's about really reaching a certain endpoint and also getting all the metrics in between, because we now really see how long did it take from here to here, how much costs have we associated with a certain activity. So there's a lot of things that you can later manage, not just on the workflow level, but even on a detailed task level. So if tasks get stuck and I'm the supervisor of certain tasks, I could also go in and pick a task, assign it to another user in the role to revamp the business process and bring it to life again. And yeah, this is really like what we do with FireStart, make a business process happen end to end and make it as convenient as possible for all of the stakeholders involved, whether it's the people designing the business process, whether it's the people extending the workflow capabilities on top of the business process, and really make the whole communication between SharePoint and other line of business applications automated and executed as best as possible. And this is also like at the end, you should really try to go for business process excellence, because like if you always separate process design from workflow automation, you will always have a very hard lost in translation effect, and it will be very much overhead if you have the two layers separated. So bringing in FireStart into your collaboration strategy for business process automation really helps you not just build small isolated workflows, but really enhance the whole data structures automation strategy to a corporate level. And then you can really step by step improve the whole business process and build all the governance that you need to have around in changing your IT and application landscapes and bring that back to your business process owners and workflow owners that they can use the business process that they need to in their daily business. So with that regard, I think we are still good in timing, and then maybe I would want to stop at this point and go maybe through questions that you would want to have from your side.
Thanks for a great presentation, Robert. Yes, we will now have the questions and answers part. And should you wish to ask Robert a question, type it into the questions window now. Robert, the first question, what is the difference between BPM and robotic process automation?
Yeah, good question. I would want to refer to this slide. So RPA has been a term that has evolved over the last 2-3 years. Mainly when you talk about robotic process automation, it's mainly about screen automation. Yeah? So it's really about simulating an end user action on top of your existing notebook. Yeah? So go to PowerPoint or go to the ribbon start, push a button here. This is something that you could record and then you could replay it like a robot. Yeah? So it really helps you get all the repetitive tasks from the human to an automated level, end user level. But again, it solves the problem for this specific end user. And this again is to incorporate into a broader workflow automation strategy, because you don't want to run your business processes on 10 different systems on robot, but you want to run them on the server side level and incorporate robots like you incorporate humans. So the main touch point to humans is the tasks and the forms, and then you can go to your business process and say, okay, this task we've just seen in the demo, process service request. Is this something that still a human needs to do, or is it something that we maybe could do on a robot? And then you could say, okay, now we replace this task and say we hand it over to a robot. And the robot would perform the task instead of a human performing the task. So this would be like the combination between business process management, workflow automation, and robotic process automation.
Great. Does FireStart integrate with SAP and Salesforce besides SharePoint and Office 365?
Yeah, we do. As you've seen in the demo, so we have a very broad standard connectivity to many different systems. That is SAP, OpenText, Salesforce. So we use a lot of standard functionality adapters like OData, like RESTful APIs, and we can always extend it with new activity sets that you've seen here. So it's really like an open platform that we can extend to numerous business process numerous applications out there in the market that we can hook up into the business workflow on our side.
Great. Can I use Power Apps and Flow together with FireStart?
Yeah, exactly. So this is also what you've seen here in the demo case. So we had now the entry point. I've just shown you with Flow. So Flow can be a really good surfacing app as a starting point for the workflow. And then later, as you've seen later in the workflow, when we say, okay, at this point, we want to hand over to a Flow to perform an update to the OneDrive. So that is a task in that process that we hand over to Flow. But again, it's an encapsulated activity where we manage all of the end-to-end business process along the way.
Great. On behalf of the ESPC community, thank you, Robert, for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot too. It was a great pleasure being on the webinar today.
Great, and it was great to catch up with you last week, Robert. I must say your stand and everything looked amazing. Did you have a good week at ESPC 19?
It was really cool. Yeah, no, we really enjoyed the week. A lot of interesting conversations, a lot of good partner relationships that we could build out through ESPC. So we really see people more and more coming also in the really business critical topics, not just talking about technology, but really talking about business value. And this is something that really is very well received also with our strategy, because business processes bring in business value. And this is maybe as a last point, really don't talk about automation, because automation for itself doesn't really have business value. Talk about automation in context with business process design and enhancement. And with that regard, you will have a lot more capabilities how you can improve your business of the organizations that you're working for.
Great. And should somebody wish to get in contact with you, you have your details on screen here
Sure.
so they can email you.
Please, if anybody has a follow-up question after the webinar, please visit our website, get in contact directly with me. You have my contact details. So we try to be as responsive as possible and engaged as possible.
Great. Robert, again, thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated.
Appreciate you too. Thanks too. See you soon.
Thanks, Robert. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, this is the end of the webinar today. Please see sharepointeurope.com for further details of all upcoming webinars, or visit our resource center where all previous episodes are available. Again, a big thank you to Robert Hutter from FireStart for his fantastic webinar today. Thank you all for joining us. Take care and goodbye.